Good evening. You are listening to Right on Campus, the UW Eau Claire College Republican podcast. Good evening. You're listening to Right on Campus, the UW Eau Claire College Republicans podcast. As always, I'm Ryan, the Vice Chair of UWEC College Republicans, and I'm joined by my co-host and working partner, Tatiana, the Chair of UWEC College Republicans. We have a great show for you tonight. Tonight we will be discussing the topic of abortion culture and the current events surrounding this topic. We'll be covering the pro-lifers pardoned, the 2025 March for Life, and the abortion issues on the upcoming ballots. With that being said, let's get into the show.
Yeah, welcome back, everyone. I hope your first week on campus has been good. We had a lovely meeting on Monday. So good to see everyone. But jumping into this, we're going to start off by just talking a little bit about the pardons that Trump made, specifically focusing on the pro-life ones.
Yeah, these were awesome.
Yeah, they really were. So just some background for any of you guys who are kind of unsure of what happened. There was quite a few pro-lifers who violated what's known as the FACE Act. And the FACE Act, or the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrance Act, it prohibits, and this is a quote from the U.S. DOJ, prohibits threats of force, obstruction, and property damage intended to interfere with reproductive healthcare services. And so what I think really concerns me about this act is it also includes intimidation. And that's where a lot of these pro-lifers were charged, was
Right.
not because they were actively doing anything wrong. And there were some, like, I'm not going to deny, there were some people who were violent and, you know, were obstructing areas, but many of them were just simply praying.
Right.
And
Yeah.
because it was considered intimidation, or it was a quote-unquote threat of force, they were sentenced to very long, like, jail time for what they did.
Yeah, aggressive
Like,
sentences.
very aggressive.
Yeah.
And so this act is supposed to protect both abortion centers and pregnancy centers. But after the reversal of Roe v. Wade, we saw many pregnancy centers with bomb threats. Some were even...
We had one firebombed in Wisconsin.
That's what I was going to say. There was one that went up in flames in Wisconsin. All over the country this was happening.
Yeah.
And I think there's maybe one or two cases where the FACE Act was used.
Yeah.
And, like,
Very sparingly.
Exactly. But all the time it was used for these abortion centers. And the crazy part is it carries up to 10 years of imprisonment.
Right.
And so, like I mentioned, most of the protesters were peaceful, sitting outside the clinic praying. I've been to pro-life protests before where you just stand outside the clinic and you pray.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very moving.
Yeah.
And it's just sad to me to see that pro-lifers, simply by taking this act of peaceful protest, that they're sentenced to prison.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was sentenced to 3 years simply for filming others that were blockading the entrance.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah.
And so, in total, Trump pardoned 23 pro-life advocates. Multiple of them were over the age of 70, including Eva Edel, who is 89, and she survived a World War II concentration camp. And her sentence, I believe, was for 3 years.
Wow.
I could be wrong on that, but it was a couple of years, I know.
Do you know when she was imprisoned?
I believe she served a year.
Under the Biden administration?
Yeah,
Okay.
These were all under the Biden administration,
Right.
I believe. And and so, but the cool part about this was the pardons were issued a day before the March for Life. So just kind of
Awesome.
symbolic in that
Yeah.
sense. And I'm very glad to see that they're not still serving.
Yeah.
But what do these pardons mean for the rest of America?
Yeah, well, okay. So my thoughts on this FACE Act thing, I'll answer this question with a little bit of a preamble. But I think that this, we do a lot of talking about the weaponization of government and the weaponization of the Department of Justice. I think there's no other way to look at this FACE Act and the fruits of the FACE Act insofar as that they imprison almost exclusively pro-lifers for nonviolent crimes. And that's the thing, is crimes here in air quotes. They basically, a bunch of Democrats and I would assume like a handful of squish Republicans would come in and write these laws that explicitly are going to be used to target a specific group of political dissidents. And I think that there's no other way to look at it than these people are characterizing the action of their political opposition as a crime so that they can prosecute them for those crimes. Praying should, one, never be a crime. Two, and it's protected under the Constitution. Two, you're in public. You have a right to protest.
Exactly.
And so, I think you get into really murky water with all this stuff where they're just like creating these acts and laws to come after the pro-lifers, and it's a total shame, and it's been abused, and I think that this means specifically for pro-life Americans moving forward that their right and quite frankly their duty to go and pray and protest the senseless murder of the innocent lives at abortion clinics and pray for their souls is going to be protected, and it needs to be protected. And I just don't see any other way of looking at it. And it's like, if people have an issue with people standing outside of a reproductive center or a abortion mill or a Planned Parenthood or whatever kind of semantics you want to use for it, I think if you have an issue with someone standing there with an image of an aborted fetus, or you have someone explaining to you what exactly is going on, and you take issue with that person, I think you're implicitly acknowledging the negativity or the evilness of the abortion itself. And I just think it's abortion's one of these issues where the more you look into it, the more light that you shine on it, the more difficult that it is for you to continue to lie to yourself just about it's health care and it's a women's right and it's all this stuff. Well, the second you start seeing the legitimate reality of what an abortion is, how damaging it is to the mother the mother post-abortion, but it's a murder of a child.
Absolutely.
And it's a contracted murder of your own child, and it's difficult for your own mind and your own heart, no matter what semantics you've been fed or what you've learned about it's healthcare and it's my right and it's blah, 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 blah. There is something guttural about an abortion that all people can't deny, that the murder of an innocent unborn child is just, it's totally wrong, and there's something evil about it. And I think that this FACE Act, pardoning these folks who, quote unquote, violated the FACE Act, is a wonderful first step. The next step is Trump needs to work with his Congress and his House and his Senate, his Congress, to repeal it. We got to get rid of the FACE Act immediately, because this is the beauty of these. It's a blessing and a curse of these executive orders. We can cheer them on because they're amazing and they're going to work for 4 years. But the second we get a president, Gavin Newsom or Michelle Obama or whoever, they can just repeal those. And then we're right back to square one. So it's going to be important to repeal this FACE Act. But I think for Americans moving forward, this is an awesome outlook.
Yeah, and I think it shows, too, that we have a president that's willing to fight for us. I think for so long there's been a disconnect between those, in government and the actual Republican people and citizens who are, middle class and just, they don't see the connect always. Where here, Trump was like, no, I see you, and I'm going to make sure that what is just is done.
Absolutely.
And that this isn't unlawful. And, and I think it's great to finally see a president who actually sees us.
Certainly.
And he's not just seeing what he wants to see.
Right.
Do you consider Trump a pro-life president? We know he's going back and forth on his statements here.
So this is a really loaded one for me. I would probably say no, straight up.
Okay.
I would say that he is leaning. I think that he is. I think he's a politician in this way. I think he's an opportunistic guy in this way. I was on the other side of this argument during the campaign when Trump, distanced himself from any sort of federal action on abortion because him and his campaign thought that it would be beneficial to the election. Now, if you'd like to point to that as the reason why he won, I guess technically I would need to concede that to you. However, I'm still firm on my stance that in order to be pro-life, you need to be pro-life.
Yeah.
And what comes with that is to recognize that if those lives are innocent and that those lives have rights, and it is wrong to murder an innocent person, period, much less without due process of law and a trial by jury of their peers, and denying them their God-given right to life, I think if you believe those things, then you necessarily would need to believe that action must be taken at a federal level. And I don't think Trump's willing to go that far just yet.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Not to say that he's not, because, with the Congress, with, the Supreme Court in his favor, I think all it's going to take is a little bit of political will on our part, the supporter and the country's part. If you saw a mass uprising in people who did support like a federal act or legislation being put in place to protect the innocent lives, I think that Trump's a crowd pleaser. I think he'd do it.
And I think that's a great point, because I think that's exactly how I would answer this question is,
how would you answer it?
He's not a pro-life president, but he's a people's president.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that.
Yeah, he's not somebody who is explicitly pro-life, like you said, but he's going to do what his people want him to do.
Right.
And I think he's proven that this first week. I mean, we were just talking about this. I've talked about it a couple times. We had our first meeting of the semester, and I went to go make our slides, and I called Ryan up, and I was like, thank you for making our slides this week. And he was like, I didn't do that. So I called Cam up, and I was like, thank you for making our slides this week. And she's like, I didn't do that. And so now I'm really confused, and I was looking back through them, and I realized they were last semester's slides on what we wanted Trump to do.
Yeah.
But they were so similar to what he's done, I didn't even catch that. And
that's actually amazing.
Yeah.
Such an amazing story.
No, it really is, because I think it goes to show that Trump is a people's president, and now the hope is he going to continue to be? And to be honest, I think he will be. I think he's shown in the past that he is.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have anything to lose this time.
Right.
So I think that will help too. And he also signed the Enforcing the Hyde Amendment executive order. I don't know if you saw that.
No, what is that?
So the Hyde Amendment he originally placed in his 2016 election, after his 2016 election, and it stops all taxpayer money from funding abortions.
Oh, wonderful.
And then Biden reversed that, and then now he re-implemented that, and so it ends all taxpayer funding of elective abortions and then any promotion of abortions.
Oh, great.
And so I think that will have a big impact. I'm curious, though, I don't know, does that affect how schools promote abortion? Or
That's a good question.
The universities?
That's the first thing that I thought of, actually.
Because, like, when you think how taxpayer money is funding abortions, I think our minds go to, like, there's this pool of taxpayer money, and they just feed it to companies.
Right.
But a lot of times there's more to it than that, you know, and I think we see it at the university level all the time, you know. I often wonder at the student health services here, are they handing people, you know, abortion pills if you come in and you're pregnant?
Right. That's a good question on, like, Wisconsin state law, because I would need to look more into that. But, you know, I know on their website they do have...
They refer you to Planned Parenthood.
They do refer you to Planned Parenthood. So, like, that's very interesting to see, like, if, you know, not just this university, but if many universities will face, I don't know, maybe legal challenges or backlash because of that. I support it fully. You know, I think abortion's a moral evil. So we absolutely shouldn't be funding it through the taxpayer.
No,
so.
I would agree, yeah. So the other thing about Trump, I think that is worthy to know, is he is the first Republican president, I think first ever Republican president to speak at the March for Life in 2016.
Wow.
He did that. And to transition to the March for Life in 2025, he did not speak this year, but he sent a little video. But this next segment, we're just going to kind of talk about that march that happened this year. And just some background for those of you guys who don't know what the March for Life is. In January of 1973, Roe v. Wade was enacted, as we all know. Abortion became legal. And then a year later, that's January, on the anniversary of Roe v. Wade, the first March for Life took place in D.C. And has continued ever since. And they marched from Capitol Hill all the way down Washington, D.C. I don't remember the exact route.
Okay.
I went one year.
Oh, yeah?
It's a really cool experience.
Is it?
Yeah.
I've always wanted to go. I think my cousins have been, but yeah, I've always wanted to go.
Maybe we go on a cigar trip next year.
Yeah, we should. We should next year.
It's usually the third weekend in January, I want to say.
Okay.
So during our break,
Yeah, winter break trip.
I'd be down. But so, and then the following, it follows with a National Pro-Life Summit where they have all these speakers.
Yeah.
That's a really cool experience as well. But this year's, Trump was not able to make it, but Vice President J.D. Vance made an appearance, and he gave a speech, and his speech was really good. I've seen some clips of it.
Really?
This is his first public address since the inauguration, which I think is a huge statement.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We talk about, is Trump a pro-life president, but I think absolutely J.D. Vance is.
Yeah, he's been pretty sound on his conviction about the abortion issue.
Exactly. And so his speech focused on the pro-family America he wants to create.
Wonderful.
And the importance of this.
Mm-hmm.
And during his speech, there's a couple things I want to highlight that he said. He said, quote, "We failed a generation not only by permitting a culture of abortion on demand, but also by neglecting to help young parents achieve the ingredients they need to lead a happy and meaningful life." And I think this is really important because so often we see the left attack us for being pro-birth.
Yeah, right.
And I think this is just totally disputing all that because the point is we're pro-family, we're not pro-birth, and we're pro-life. And I mean, we're pro-birth.
Yeah, I was
but
about to say that. Yeah,
we are pro-birth, but
Yeah.
it goes beyond that, you know.
I think you might be forced. Don't they usually say forced birth?
Yes,
Yeah, right.
yeah, that's often used with it too. Yeah, and then my favorite line that he said during his speech was, "quote I want more babies in the United States of America."
Real.
And that just made me so happy to hear.
Yeah.
It's just a crazy thought that that's like a radical statement.
I know. It's
but
something.
I don't know. It gives me baby fever just thinking about it. And then he just talked a lot about the way we have lost like this generational connectedness and community because of abortion. Like there are generations that are not here because we have committed abortion and we've lost this connection to those people.
Yeah.
And abortion, you're losing that connection from generation to generation. It used to be that there was this family unit and the grandparents would pass on to the parents who would pass on to the kids, but now it's grandparents who pass on to the parents who abort their babies.
Yeah, right. I saw this cool quote once. It was like at a high school graduation. It was like, 1/3 of your classmates aren't here.
Yeah. Dang.
Because 1/3 of that generation or generations forth is typically aborted. And it's millions a year. Pre-Dobbs, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's just...
like, that could be, like, our best friend.
Yeah.
Like,
it could be your wife.
Yeah.
It could be your husband,
Yeah.
And it's just so heartbreaking.
Wow. For many people, it could be their sibling even.
Yeah. No, exactly.
And
seriously.
Yeah. It's just such a tragedy. Speaker Mike Johnson also spoke at the march. He talked about the recent executive order that where Trump declared male and female begin at conception, and noted that this alludes to personhood. And
wonderful.
I think Trump made that executive order focused on protecting women in private spaces, but adding that key point that it is female at conception, I think helps a lot with the pro-life movement.
Totally. The conception piece is totally necessary. I don't know. It's just that, we talk kind of back and forth with a lot of dissenters about this, but it's this argument about personhood. And I think it's just difficult for me to, sympathize with that position when people, are trying to draw this line of personhood and then at the same time speak out of the other side of their mouth about human rights and dignity and all this stuff. It's just, to me, it's like if humans are to have rights, period.
They have to begin at conception.
Well, necessarily, if you're a human and you have rights, when do you become a human?
Exactly.
You become a human at the moment you're conceived.
You can't have a distinct line between personhood and human.
Because you're not a dog before you're born. You're a human. You're just a preborn human.
Humans are assigning when personhood begins, and that gets very dangerous.
No, right. And it's happened before.
Yeah. And then another cool part about the march, too, that I thought would be fun to mention is, this is very, literally a week after Trump's been inaugurated. And so tons of the fight, fight, fight T-shirts were seen just throughout the march.
Yeah.
I think it goes to show, too, that, like Trump saying fight, 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 I think gave some hope and some courage, and
Oh, yeah.
it inspired people to truly stand up and fight.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
and I think the march is a beautiful way of showing that, because it's such a peaceful march.
Mm-hmm.
And like in the march, one thing I was talked about is you're not walking around chanting. Everyone is walking down the streets of Washington, D.C. praying.
Mm-hmm.
And you genuinely are mourning the loss of lives
Mm-hmm.
while also celebrating the lives that have been saved since the reversal. And because the year I went was actually the year before they had just reversed Roe v. Wade, so it was the first
Really?
post Roe march, and that
Oh,
was really
wow.
cool. Yeah,
Wow.
and so it's really cool to see that combination of like, we're gonna save these babies, but also
Did you go under Biden?
yes, right? I think
Okay.
my freshman
But
year.
Trump didn't speak at yours.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Yeah.
No, I'm trying to think. I can't think of anyone key who spoke. But yeah, it was still a great experience. I think it was Biden because it
It
was
had to
my
have been
freshman
Biden.
year.
Yeah, it had to have been Biden. Yeah.
But yeah, so how does the march overall impact the country, since, abortion is left up to the states? And so what's the statement being made here, and how does it impact us as a country when it's not necessarily a national issue right now?
It's a good question. I think it maybe does two things. One, it kind of puts the correct face on pro-lifers.
Yeah.
Pro-lifers are often characterized as these old Handmaid's Tale pro-fascist. Everybody's
Yeah.
gonna get locked up and have to have their child no matter what. And to use some aggressive language, like people are like, oh, pro-rape, pro all this
Yeah.
stuff, and that's just totally wrong. You look at the March for Life. I'm sure you can attest to this. You were one of them. There's a lot of youthful people.
It was
a lot of young people.
It was. I would say it was, but at least half the people on my bus out there were like my age or so.
Like very energetic young people who are just convicted on this issue. I think that's the other thing too, is you're talking about the prayer and the solemn atmosphere of those who were lost. I think it really dampens that characterization of pro-lifers being these aggressive, like rights-taking fascists, when we're just looking out for the innocent.
No, exactly.
And it's it's very spiritual in that sense, that you're praying for their soul and you're praying for their deliverance. And it's just I think it's wonderful. And it also, I think too, we talked about it at the beginning, but I think it does. It's a good thing. We need people from all states coming together in the Capitol to say in one voice in the Capitol that this isn't just a state's issue, that this is a moral issue.
This is a worldwide issue.
This is a worldwide issue, but this is a moral issue facing our country, and we need to take a national stance on this.
Yeah.
And it can't just be, well, whatever. If California wants to decide that they are going to kill 70 million babies a year, then so be it. That's their right. No, it's actually not, because that's murder, and murder's wrong.
No, exactly. And I think one thing that I really remembered about the march when I went was, every single state is there, and when they're giving, speeches and whatnot, they start to go through the list of like accomplishments in the past year. And it's really cool to see the states who have made progress, and it gives you some hope for your state.
Yeah.
Especially after the reversal of Roe, no one knew what was going to happen.
Right.
We were kind of all like, is Wisconsin going to be a trigger state? Like, what's going to happen here? And it gives hope.
Explain what a trigger state is for the audience.
So a trigger state is a state that after Roe, their old laws go into effect. And so, like, if a state, I want to say South Dakota is one of them.
We were one of them.
Were we officially one of them?
Yeah, it's why the Protasiewicz election mattered so much.
And yeah, so our laws go into place and it essentially bans abortion because there was a law back whenever that was made where some states just kind of were like, no, we're not gonna worry about it, or they didn't have laws or whatnot. So yeah, I don't know. I think the march is a really cool experience.
Yeah. How do you think that it impacts the country?
I think that it shows how many of us there are.
Yeah.
And I think what we were talking about earlier, Trump's a people's president.
Yeah.
it's a chance to talk to Trump.
Yeah.
And it's one thing for Trump to hear things here or there from pro-lifers, but to see all of them congregated together.
Outside your window.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. To have the vice president come out and speak to them and to, communicate with them. It's just an amazing experience. And
March with them.
yeah, no, exactly. And then I think the Pro-Life Summit is a great experience as well it's specifically targeted for students.
Yeah.
And you become educated and you learn about things. One thing I learned about while I was there was the chemical abortion, the way it's impacting our water systems and even our fields and everything.
Yeah.
And you just learn a lot.
Right.
And it gives you this like zeal or fortitude to just go out and make change and do something. And I don't know, it's just a really cool experience that I definitely recommend people go on. And I'm glad that it happens every year despite the president. Like even, when Joe Biden was president, we still had it happening. And now to see just such a hopeful march, I guess.
Yeah. All right. So I've answered this next question, but I'm gonna turn it to you.
Okay.
Because everybody knows my feelings on this. But do you think that this is a national or a state issue?
So I think we take a win where we can take a win.
Sure. It's a good answer.
I think I would like it to be a national issue,
Yeah.
but I don't know if it ever will be.
Yeah.
I think it should be a national issue. We're talking about human rights. I think it's a constitution issue if we really want to
Certainly.
get down to it. But I think right now, I don't know if that would go anywhere. I mean, like you said, now is the time, I guess. Like, if we're going to do something, we got to do it now while we have everything.
Right.
But I think what would likely happen is we just end up in this back and forth between the Supreme Court overruling it, ruling on it, and just overturning things back and forth. Where I think at the state level, you can push more for a culture change. And when the culture changes within a state, then you can change the laws within the state. And to be honest, more than anything, I don't even think it's an issue of law. It's an issue of culture.
So, sure.
We hear the argument so often that, well, if you outlaw abortion, women are still going to get them. They're just going to be more dangerous.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that's why I don't want abortion to just be outlawed. I want it to be unthinkable. I don't want you to find out you're pregnant and your immediate reaction be like, I have to get rid of it.
Yeah.
I want you to find out you're pregnant and be like, I mean, sure, you might be scared. You might be like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I want there to be hope. I want there to be, excitement for this new life and help from your community. And there's something so beautiful about the way a community can gather around and help create the next generation. And I think that's what J.D. Vance was talking about in his speech a lot.
Takes a village kind of
Exactly.
thing. Yeah.
And I think that's something that's so cool about America is we're these different cultures that come together to create this American culture of community. And we've lost that so much. And so I don't know if I really gave an answer to the question. But overall, I think it's a culture issue. So at that way, it's a state issue. But I would not be opposed to a national abortion ban.
No, right. And I agree with you. Like take the wins where we can get them. I totally agree. Yeah.
And I think that's part of the reason that Republicans in general don't do as well is we're all or nothing sometimes.
Yeah. No,
And
that is true.
And there's a time and place for that.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to be willing to compromise on some things and
Right.
and it's not necessarily that you're compromising on your values. It's that you're moving the needle.
Right. Yeah. No, I don't disagree. And I do recognize that, like, even in red states, like Ohio and some of the Kansas, some of these states have had referendums. We're going to get to that later, but and they didn't go the way we wanted them to. And it is important to remember that, like, maybe we don't have to necessarily compromise on those by maybe tabling it. During a contentious election without necessarily having to run on that.
Yeah.
I can get behind that. But yeah, I don't know. This is just such a tough one for me because I just think it's so glaringly obvious and it's such a moral thing for me that I really wish that we could live in a country where, people were as convicted as we used to be, quite frankly, on this issue.
I agree. And I think it's kind of a scary thought that we are so slow moving with this in a sense. And I understand it's going to take time.
Right.
But just to think that, the millions of babies that have been murdered because of abortion is just, it's heartbreaking. And we're all about well, it's, you just got to take one step forward and one step forward. And I get that, and, and that is important. But at the same time, it's like, when are we going to stand up and actually do something?
Yeah, at some point, somebody's got to put their foot down.
Exactly.
You know?
And, like I think, often we get criticized for comparing this to something like the Holocaust.
Sure.
And in many ways it's different, but in the fact that millions of people were killed, it's not. And, abortion is the largest genocide in our history.
It's clearly far worse. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think so often people are like, why didn't people stand up in Nazi Germany?
Yeah.
Why didn't they do something?
Right.
Well, why don't you do something now?
Right.
It's the same thing. And you start to see the way history repeats itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it's very interesting. I'm taking a class right now on medical horror stories and where we've gone wrong in America.
Oh, that's a very interesting class.
Yeah. And we're currently reading Frankenstein, which is my favorite book. And we are just talking about the way that people become power hungry and dehumanize other people because of that.
Yeah.
And we get to do a final project on what we're currently doing in America.
Nice.
And so this very likely will be my topic.
Awesome. Well, that's good for you. I will just say, too, one thing to add on this, like, should we act now? Should we table it? How do we... I would encourage people to consider, if Democrats had the power that we have, they would not hold off.
No,
They
exactly.
would go right for the throat, and they would
Exactly.
that would be like a day one thing, is they would write, and not just executive order, but they would immediately get the Congress mobilized, the Democrat Congress, to pass through a Democrat House and a Democrat Senate, signed with the Democrat executive pen to grant abortion legislation. So I think it's and then another facet of this is to consider, we have a historic, unprecedented majority on the Supreme Court at this point. And so if we were to put something at that Supreme Court's discretion, now is likely the time where they would more likely rule in our favor, or rule in the favor of justice at this point. And so it's just something to consider with, like, oh, well, we shouldn't be talking about abortion, it's not a winner. Well, we could get back to a point where the Democrats are in control of everything again, and there's nothing that we can do. And then now we're trying to claw back. Where this is this political tug of war that we always play, but it's just, I think this is just too important of an issue to miss on. And so we need to play our cards right here. I'm in favor of a national movement on this, but I see the other side. So that's what I'll say.
No, and that's fair. And I think, to those of you listening out there, I think now is the time for you to really figure out what abortion is, to do your research, and to find a way you can help.
Right. Because they need it. They don't have a voice.
Yeah.
And they can't defend themselves. So, okay. So the next segment we wanted to talk about was just some state-level battles over abortion law. So I mentioned a couple before, but we'll give it a slight bit of background, and then we'll go into some key examples. So Roe v. Wade was overturned just a few years ago by the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health decision, and it is still a very heated policy battle in the country, because we've been talking about a national versus a state issue this whole time. Basically, what the Dobbs decision did is it didn't rule that abortion was a constitutionally protected right, and anything, just for some context, anything that's not ruled on by the Constitution then goes back to the states for their own jurisdictions to decide on. And so many states had what Tatiana mentioned, trigger laws that went into effect, triggering these 1865 laws that ban abortion, or in some cases, like, California had protected abortion, so it was no issue there, or Delaware and Maine and X, Y, and Z, New York, just for examples. Those states would trigger abortion protection laws. So basically, several states have had these challenges to these trigger laws, and namely one of those was Ohio. Ohio had a trigger law that banned abortion, and there was like a famous story that the Democrats ran with a ton, was like this 10-year-old girl had to flee Ohio and get an abortion, and it was a rape case, which is like, those stories are so heavy and so
Yeah.
loaded and so difficult, and you really have to touch them very fragilely because you obviously can't make really a ton of people happy, and having a very hardline principled take on it is difficult to do because even some of the most conservative people on many issues will disagree on this
Oh, yeah.
issue. But the fallout from this, it basically triggered a ballot campaign where these legal groups wrote a provision, and then it was voted on, and the abortion restriction failed in Ohio, and so they granted abortion rights in Ohio.
Okay.
The same thing happened in Arizona.
Okay.
And then the same thing happened in Kansas. So those are a couple states where they're very red states. Arizona's kind of a toss-up state we think of, but it's culturally a very conservative state. You know, southern, western. And so that's some surprising developments. However, Florida continues to be the champion of the conservative movement. And they actually, this year, they had a abortion referendum which passed, and it was signing into law a 6-week abortion ban and no longer having abortion rights in Florida. So
Amen.
that's wonderful.
That's so good.
Ron DeSantis has done well. That state, and it's not just DeSantis. DeSantis has done a very good job governing that state, but it's the people.
Yeah.
It's the conservative migrants who have migrated from their blue hellholes to Florida in the sake of political refuge that have done a very good job at turning that state from purple to red.
I mean, who wouldn't want to go to Florida? It's conservative, sunny, there's a beach.
Well, I will say the humidity sucks. The alligators scare me. You can't swim in the water.
Yeah.
There's gators and stuff. They have brain-eating amoebas.
But you can go to the ocean.
The ocean's cool. The ocean's pretty. The culture's cool. They got sand. It's hot. There's golf.
Yeah.
It's a cool place.
Margaritaville. I feel like it's a good vacation place. I wouldn't want to live there.
Yeah.
I'd want to live there for DeSantis.
Yeah, I've gone back and forth on it too. It'd be cool to live there, but it's I don't know. I think I'm a Midwest guy.
No,
I'm
me
a Midwest
too.
body. I can't really leave. So there's something about the cold.
I don't
that's
think
just
I
in
would
my
survive
veins.
without the snow.
No, I couldn't either. The cold.
Although Florida got snow.
They did. Yeah, they
So-
did. They did. Record snow, thanks to climate change. Basically, there's going to be a continued push for these ballot measures throughout many states. And I don't know off the top of my head which ones are to come next, but there's a very good chance that your state, if you're listening out of Wisconsin, could have a abortion referendum. But mentioning Wisconsin, I think that'll move us into the most important state that we wanted to talk about, and abortion measures on the ballot in our state.
So, those of you who don't know, we have an election this spring. This election, I think, is just as important as the last election. So, if you are out of state, register to vote in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
This is so, so vital. So, for some background, it's a Supreme Court election.
Right.
And Ann Walsh Bradley announced she was not seeking re-election, allowing the opportunity for a more conservative judge to take her seat. And if a conservative judge does take her seat, it splits the court. Because currently they have a liberal majority.
Liberal majority, right.
And one of the things that the court is considering right now is whether or not the 1894 abortion law should stay in place and ban abortion. And so it's currently kind of on pause, where technically the law is in effect, but Governor Evers is like,
Right.
we're not going to do anything.
Enforcing it,
Yeah.
right.
But
It's awaiting ruling.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so Brad Schimmel has spoken up for the unborn during his time as Wisconsin's Attorney General and
Awesome.
has decided to run. And if you are not registered to vote in Wisconsin, you're going to want to do that this spring. April 1st is the election. Mark your calendars. And I think, this is, like I said, one of the most important elections because we're talking about literal lives on the line.
Yeah.
And it goes beyond that too. Voter ID is also on the ballot.
Yeah.
And Act 10 or
Election integrity. Yeah.
all that stuff is up in the Wisconsin Supreme Court this year. So I think it's so, so important that we elect someone like Brad and we take initiative to help elect someone like him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I really hope. I mean, we've struggled in this state with a lot of candidates. I mean, like Ron Johnson's the only candidate I can think of besides like Van Orden, you know. But Ron Johnson, Van Orden, these are some of the only candidates that I think have
really made a
won, or much less kept their seats. But have we
and not even just
any?
won, but they've done a good job too.
Oh, they have done a good job, and you know, it's like, but I remember like, you know, Dan Kelly ran against Protasiewicz, and he, you know, we couldn't get it done with him, and then. Yeah. Governor Michaels, would-be Governor Michaels tried to run against Evers. He couldn't get it done either. And Baldwin, Hovde, you know, I mean, that was a really good charge, but yeah. And so I think it's important that we really throw our weight behind Schimmel, and we recognize that, you know, I mean, this is going to determine abortion access in the state. And if you value life, you got to get out there and at least vote for Brad Schimmel.
No, exactly.
Much less, you know, work with him or work for the cause or whatever.
No, exactly. And I know this weekend even people are going out from our club to door knock.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's just so important that I think we get out there and we voice the importance of this election, the importance of standing up for the unborn. And I think so often conservatives don't want to speak on this topic.
Yeah.
And they're kind of like, oh, how do we elect this person without talking about abortion? But no, stand up and fight. Like, get off the defensive and get on the offensive.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And, you know, like, say, yeah, I'm pro-life, I'm pro-baby. There's nothing wrong with that, you know? And the president of the United States and his vice president literally want more babies in America.
Absolutely.
Like, this is the time.
Right.
You know, there's a whole community. And I think even just to think how many people voted for Trump, there's probably, you know, a good chunk of those who are pro-life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to think that, you know, almost majority of America, probably, if not majority, is pro-life.
Yeah.
And now
well, they're more pro-life than they know. And that's the thing.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And that's what I wanted to say is I think that's such a great point that you brought up is there's a lot of people, I know in my life, but just all over the country who are extraordinarily conservative on many different topics, you know, from tax to foreign policy to the gender crap to CRT in schools to policing to everything to crime, border, everybody who I've talked to who is super conservative, but then maybe kind of isn't there with this issue. It comes down to like a social pressure thing. Like they feel bad like that, you know, they feel pinched when somebody comes at them with these specific cases or they come at them with these, you know, these sharp words characterizing them because they don't support abortions full stop. And they think that, oh, well, you know, maybe to appease that person, I need to come over towards them. Well, I think the best piece of advice to take away is if you're hesitant to go all the way or to want to be fully convicted on this issue, it just has to come down to the morality of it. You know, you just need to look at the morality of it. Look at look up, if you don't have an infant child in your life, you know, look up a video of a little baby and its face and its beautiful face and look at its beautiful little feet and think about yourself. Think about your child someday, you know, think about your children. Think about what your life would be like without those children. Think about the turmoil that maybe you've gone through in your life. And would it be worth it for you to sacrifice some of that turmoil to lose your child? No, it wouldn't, you know? No. And so it's just to develop a little bit more of a moral conviction on this and to recognize that, you know, it does matter. It does matter.
Yeah.
This is an issue of life or death. And
exactly.
And to advocate for someone who's voiceless and who's powerless is the most honorable thing you can do, in my opinion. And I think when you feel the pressure, you know that you're probably in the right spot. You know, you're probably over the target.
And I think you bring up a good point by saying it's life and death here, because I think people get so caught up in the emotions of it and the little detailed emotions, like, but this woman is going to suffer and suffer and suffer. And it's like, well, are we just going to ignore the fact that a literal human being is being murdered?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's already somebody suffering at the hands of abortion.
Right.
And, you know, you gotta take the emotions out of it.
Yeah.
And you have to look at it logically. This is life and death.
Right.
And I think when you look at it that way, there is only one possible answer. And I think we've gotten to a society where we focus on our emotions so much that we don't look at the truth, and we're more concerned with being comfortable than being right and true.
Yeah. No, and not to go there, but the good Lord says, when you're hated, remember that they hated me
No,
first.
yeah.
And, think about like if somebody's hating you, or, the typical liberal, like Chud meme where they're screaming at you or whatever, or Soy Jack meme where they're screaming at you. It's like, that's an honor. Like,
Yeah.
it is an absolute blessing that you are standing there in defense of the defenseless, and do it for his sake, do it for their sake, and just stand firm in your conviction, because I'm so morally convicted on this one. It's kind of easy for me to sit here and say, and I recognize that a lot of people are in a halfway spot with this issue, and I respect that, because I've been there.
Yeah.
I have been there,
Yeah.
and I haven't always been as morally convicted on it as I am now. But I just think it's one of these issues that you really have to think about and look at. Force yourself to really see what it is, what's going on, how many babies are killed, and then look at the inverse. What happens when we stop doing abortions?
Yeah.
More little, beautiful, tiny infant children are born. Is that a bad thing?
No, exactly. And I think too, like, look at what you're saying to people who have had a hard home life.
Yeah.
When you say that these kids would be better off dead
Right.
than to be born.
Like, that's not compassion.
No. I
Yeah.
mean, I know plenty of people who grew up in the exact circumstances that they say these babies shouldn't have to grow up in. And
Right.
you're right, they shouldn't have to. But
That's so true.
but
Yes.
their life happens, unfortunately, and we
Absolutely.
live in a broken world.
Right.
And there's going to be trials, and yeah, they shouldn't have to, but I would rather have them here.
No, absolutely. Well, and I think about how, not to be sharp, but how disgustingly privileged and
Yeah.
first world it is to say that, like, we should have abortion full stop in inner cities because some people might grow up in a terrible situation in Chicago. You could be born in Delhi.
Yeah.
You could be born in Bangladesh. You could be born in Afghanistan. I mean,
No, exactly.
And you could live your life and every single day look at the sky and think of that as a blessing, or have a small meal and be in a terrible, terrible situation, and that is, life is a blessing. Life is too sacred of a blessing for us to just willy-nilly sacrifice in this way for convenience sake. And I think that's my piece on this issue. I mean, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
I think I would just say, too, with this issue, there are a lot of people in America now who have had abortions or know someone who have.
Yeah.
And I think, at least, I can't speak for you, but I would assume you have a similar view with, your faith system, but you can come over here. We do not, bash you for having an abortion.
No.
Or if your friends did, to be honest, I want to hear your story.
It's a shame.
And I would love to talk with you about it and sit down and, just listen to your story. And I think that there's a lot of love and compassion on the pro-life side that's not talked about for those women. And we recognize that is an incredibly hard decision that you made. And you shouldn't have had to make that decision, and I think it's really just a sad thing to see, but we don't blame you. We don't hold it against you. Like, I personally do not consider a mother who aborted her baby to be a murderer. I consider the doctor who performed the abortion to be the murderer.
That is certainly true.
And so I think that's something, that gives hope to some of those mothers. And to know that if you did have an abortion and you struggled with that it's okay to struggle with that, and that we are going to be here to walk you out of that. And, and we want to hear your story. We want to be able to help more women to not ever end up in that situation. And so I guess I just want to end with that, because I know this can be a touchy subject for anyone who has encountered that.
Yeah. I just, not to get on the pulpit here, but, somebody paid that price already.
Absolutely.
And you can reconcile that shame or that sin or that feeling at the foot of the cross.
Absolutely.
And you can lay it all at his feet, and Jesus forgives all actions, and as long as it's in sincerity and you come to him, And so I think that's maybe an important thing to leave with is just, I love that part where we're not mean and we don't want to scorn you and
No,
make you,
exactly.
reprimand you for any kind of decisions that have been made in haste or in the wrong state of mind, and that, all things happen, for a reason, good or bad, and it's important to remember that, like you can reconcile that.
Yeah,
with the
no,
Lord
exactly. And there's
and-
absolutely
Mhm.
hope.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's always hope. Anyway, I think that's great to end with. Thanks for listening to Right on Campus. We post this podcast weekly where we are tackling current events and life as a conservative on campus. If you'd like to learn more about UWEC College Republicans, join our meetings on Monday nights in Centennial 1704 at 7 p.m. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at UWEC College Republicans. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and favorite and share this podcast if you're on Spotify. Have a great night. Thank you for listening to Right on Campus. We post this podcast once a week where we talk about current events and life as a conservative on campus. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at UWEC College Republicans. Have a great night and see you next time.